Have you ever just stared at a world map and thought, how did we get all these lines? Why is one country shaped like a boot and another is a perfect rectangle? Well, I can tell you those borders are anything but random and they are definitely not permanent. Okay, let's dive into the powerful forces that are constantly drawing, erasing, and redrawing the map of our world.
The map we see today, with its roughly 200 countries, is really just the product of centuries of conflict, negotiation, expansion, and collapse. It's a snapshot in time, not some finished masterpiece. Every single one of those borders tells a story of birth, of growth, or sometimes of being carved up by a more powerful neighbor.
So this all leads to the big question we're tackling here. Why aren't the lines on a map permanent? Well, the answer involves this constant push and pull between forces that build nations up and other forces that try to tear them apart.
So let's start at the very beginning, with how countries are even formed in the first place. It all begins with a single idea and a place.
That driving idea, it's called self-determination. It's this powerful concept that a group of people who see themselves as a distinct nation, sharing a culture, a language, and identity, have the right to form their own state and govern themselves. That drive, that very human need to control your own destiny, is one of the most fundamental forces in political geography. It fueled everything from the American Revolution to countless other movements throughout history.
But an idea needs a place to take root, right? And that place is what geographers call a core area. The best way to think of it is like a seed. It's a small, often resource-rich or easily defended territory where a country's power, culture, and population start to concentrate and then just expand outwards. And Russia is a perfect, almost textbook example of this whole process in action. You can trace its growth right back to the 1300s, when its core area was just a small principality around Moscow. But over the next 600 years, that political control just diffuses outwards, kind of like ripples in a pond, eventually stretching from the Baltic Sea all the way to the Pacific Ocean. An absolutely massive country, all grown from one tiny seed.
France is another classic case. Its core area was the Paris Basin, and from there it expanded until it hit natural defensive barriers. You've got the Pyrenees Mountains in the south, the Alps in the east. These landforms essentially provided a natural container, helping to shape the stable, recognizable borders of modern France we see today.
But of course, countries rarely grow into empty space. More often than not, their expansion comes at the expense of other people. And that brings us to the next massive force that completely redrew the world map, the Age of Empire.
Now, you hear these two words, imperialism and colonialism, used interchangeably all the time, but there's a really key difference. Imperialism is the big picture idea of a powerful country dominating a weaker one for its resources or for a strategic location. Colonialism, on the other hand, is the boots-on-the-ground result of that idea. It's the formal conquest, the setting up of rule, often with administrators sent from the homeland. To put it simply, colonialism is how imperialism gets done.
And nowhere was this process more dramatic than in the scramble for Africa. European powers literally just drew lines on a map to divide the continent among themselves. The main goal was to extract resources, and these new colonial boundaries often sliced right through existing ethnic or tribal lands. This created these artificial states that lumped rival groups together or split unified groups apart, sowing the seeds for conflicts that, in some cases, are still being fought today. It wasn't just Africa, of course. For centuries, Spain and Portugal dominated South America. Their goals were pretty straightforward: get their hands on valuable metals like silver and gold, and open up new markets for their manufactured goods. This whole colonial enterprise completely redrew the political and cultural map of an entire continent.
But empires create a powerful backlash. The very same idea that built nations in Europe, that idea of self-determination, would eventually be used to dismantle their overseas empires.
And here's a fascinating bit of irony. To run their colonies, European powers needed educated local administrators, so they sent the best and brightest to be educated in Europe. And what did they learn there? They learned about Western ideas of liberty, nationalism, and, you guessed it, self-determination. They came back home, armed not just with skills, but with the philosophical justification to demand their own freedom. It's like a political fire lit in the heart of the empire, carried home to burn it all down.
And the result was an absolute tidal wave of change that swept the globe. Just look at Africa. Before 1950, there were only 4 independent states. But in the 1950s, the movement builds unstoppable momentum. The 1960s saw a massive peak in new nations being born.
And by 1994, virtually the entire continent consisted of self-ruling countries. That is an incredible political transformation in just a few decades.
And you can see that wave visualized right here, almost like dominoes falling across the continent. The light purple shows those few independent nations before 1950. Then you see the darker purples and greens sweep southwards, decade by decade, until the whole map is colored in. It's just a powerful visual story of liberation.
So, we've seen how nations are built from a core, and how empires rise and then fall. But the story doesn't end there. Today, one of the biggest pressures changing political geography comes not from the outside, but from within a country's own borders. The key process here is called devolution. It's when a central government transfers power to regional governments. Now, this can be a way to manage internal divisions and keep everyone happy, but it can also be the first step towards a region breaking away entirely.
So what causes these devolutionary pressures? Well, they typically stem from one of three sources. You have ethnocultural forces, which are all about identity. People who feel their unique language, religion, or ethnicity isn't really represented by the state. Then there are economic forces, which pop up when a wealthy region feels like it's giving way more than it gets back. And finally, you have territorial forces, which can happen when a region is physically distant, like an island, making it feel disconnected from the center of power.
Let's look at a real-world example: Spain. On the left, you see that 15th century Spain was basically forged from a union of distinct kingdoms, like Castile and Aragon. This created these lasting ethnocultural fault lines. Fast forward to today, and you see the wealthy region of Catalonia, highlighted on the right, which continues to push for more autonomy. And it's driven by a powerful mix of its distinct culture and its economic strength.
And these de-evolutionary pressures can have wildly different outcomes. In 1993, ethnocultural differences between Czechs and Slovaks led to the peaceful division of Czechoslovakia into two new countries, the Velvet Divorce. But in stark contrast, similar pressures in Yugoslavia in the 1990s led to a decade of absolutely brutal, violent conflict as the country fractured along ethnic and religious lines.
And make no mistake, this isn't just ancient history we're talking about. This map shows active de-evolutionary pressures simmering all across modern Europe. You see hotspots in Scotland, the Basque Country, Corsica, northern Italy. I mean, it's all over the continent. These are stable, wealthy countries wrestling with the exact same internal forces that can splinter states apart. The drawing of the map is very much an ongoing process.
Which leaves us with one final thought. From the beginning, we've seen these two competing stories: the consolidation of power from a core area outwards, and the fragmentation of power as empires collapse and regions splinter away. These forces are still clashing today. So the real question is, what will the world map look like when our great-grandchildren are studying it? What lines will have vanished, and what new ones will have appeared?